Nearly 70 years ago, Cecil B. DeMille released a film so massive in scope that it redefined what a biblical epic could be. The Ten Commandments swept audiences into the world of ancient Egypt with towering sets, a cast of thousands, and performances that have never quite faded from memory. But behind the sweeping music and the parting of the Red Sea were real people, actors who lived full, complicated, sometimes heartbreaking lives once the cameras stopped rolling. Today we are going back to find out what really happened to the stars who built this legend, and along the way there is a twist that might genuinely surprise you, because not everyone from this cast is gone. Stick with us until the end. Let's start with Yvonne De Carlo, who played Sephora, the devoted wife of Moses. De Carlo brought warmth and quiet resilience to the role, and her chemistry with Charlton Heston helped ground the film's grand religious spectacle in something tender and human. Long before Hollywood, she was a Canadian girl from Vancouver whose mother recognized her gift early and pushed her into dance lessons. That early training carried her into beauty pageants once she and her mother relocated to Los Angeles, and it was there she met showman Nils Granlund, a connection that opened the first doors of her career. She spent years in small, uncredited parts before her breakout came in the 1945 Western Salome, where she danced, a role built around her dancing background that suddenly made her a name audiences recognized. Her career would stretch across more than 50 years, and as she aged she gracefully shifted into character work rather than fading away, a rare feat in an industry that often discards its leading ladies. By 1960, Hollywood had honored her with 2 stars on the Walk of Fame, one for film and one for television, recognition of just how wide her body of work had become. Her personal life drew just as much attention as her filmography. She was linked romantically to Howard Hughes and actor Robert Stack before meeting stuntman Bob Morgan on the set of Shotgun in 1955. The two married that same year and had 2 sons together, Bruce and Michael, though the marriage ended in divorce in 1973. De Carlo was also known for her outspoken conservative politics, aligning herself publicly with leaders like Nixon, Reagan, and Ford, but in her later decades, she became most passionate about animal welfare, using whatever platform she still had to advocate for causes she believed in. A minor stroke in the late 1990s slowed her down, and she eventually moved into the motion picture and television country house and hospital in Woodland Hills, where she lived out her final years. Yvonne De Carlo died on January 8, 2017, at 84 years old from heart failure, closing out a life that had taken her from a dance studio in Vancouver to one of the most iconic sets in film history. Then there's Olive Dearing, who played Miriam, the sister of Moses. Her performance carried a quiet intensity that turned a supporting role into something emotionally central to the film, and her delivery of the line about deliverance from bondage is still one of the more quoted moments from a movie. Born Olive Corn in New York City in 1918, she came from a household that clearly valued creativity, her father a dentist, and her mother someone who actively nurtured her children's artistic instincts. Her older brother, who acted under the name Alfred Ryder, shared her love of performance, and by age 11 Olive was already enrolled at the Professional Children's School in New York, setting her on a path that would keep her working for decades. Her stage career actually outshined her screen work in terms of sheer volume. She appeared in acclaimed productions like Winged Victory and Tennessee Williams' Suddenly Last Summer, and in 1980, she reunited on stage with her brother in a revival of another Williams play, proof that her talent had aged as well as it had matured. On screen and television, she amassed more than 200 credits, showing up in anthology dramas like Perry Mason and The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, and she brought that same versatility to radio work, lending her voice to programs where she had nothing but her tone and timing to build a character. Her personal life included a brief marriage to director Leo Penn in 1947 that ended in divorce, and politically, she was active on the other side of the aisle from De Carlo, supporting Adlai Stevenson's presidential run in 1952. Olive Dearing passed away from cancer on March 22, 1986, at the age of 67, and although she never had children of her own, her decades of stage, screen, and radio work left behind a legacy that theater historians still point to today. Of course, no conversation about this film is complete without Charlton Heston, who played Moses and became, for many people, the definitive face of the character. His performance is often cited as one of the most commanding in cinematic history, and it cemented him as a symbol of stoic leadership on screen for the rest of his career. Born John Charles Carter in Illinois in 1923, his childhood was shaped by his parents' divorce, which sent him to rural Michigan with his mother, where he developed a lifelong love of hunting and fishing. He eventually returned to Illinois, and it was at New Trier High School that his interest in performing took hold, an interest he carried into Northwestern University before enlisting in the Army Air Forces during World War II, where he served as an aerial gunner and radio operator. After the war, he moved to New York and worked as an artist model while chasing stage roles, eventually making his Broadway debut in 1948 in a production of Antony and Cleopatra. Hollywood noticed quickly, casting him as Mark Antony in a film adaptation of Julius Caesar the following year. From there, his career exploded into decades of larger-than-life roles, most famously as Judah Ben-Hur in 1959, a performance that won him the Academy Award for Best Actor, and later as the lead in Planet of the Apes, a film that gave him a very different kind of iconic status. He also took on gritty, less mythic roles in films like Soylent Green and Touch of Evil, proving his range went well beyond biblical spectacle. In his personal life, he married his college sweetheart Lydia Clark in 1944, and the two stayed together for over 60 years, raising 2 children, until his death in 2008. He faced prostate cancer in 1998 and beat it, but in 2002, he announced publicly that he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, a diagnosis that effectively ended both his acting career and his tenure as president of the National Rifle Association. Charlton Heston died on April 5, 2008, at 84 from complications related to pneumonia, leaving behind an estimated $40 million fortune and a body of work that continues to define what an old-school Hollywood leading man looked like. And Baxter played Nefertiti, the scheming, love-torn daughter of Pharaoh, and her tense, magnetic dynamic with Heston's Moses became one of the most talked-about relationships in the film. Baxter had an unusual pedigree for an actress, being the granddaughter of architect Frank Lloyd Wright, and she grew up immersed in a family that valued design and artistry. She trained under respected acting coach Maria Ouspenskaya before making her film debut in 20 Mule Team in 1940, quickly becoming a contract player at 20th Century Fox. Her real breakthrough came with The Razor's Edge in 1946, a performance that won her both an Academy Award and a Golden Globe, and she followed that with an Oscar nomination for Best Actress for her work in All About Eve in 1950. Even with that resume, her role in The Ten Commandments became one of her most iconic, earning her a Laurel Award for her performance. Her personal life was eventful in its own right. She married actor John Hodiak in 1946 and had a daughter, Katrina, but the marriage ended in divorce in 1953, something Baxter later took ownership of in her memoirs. In the mid-1950s, she became romantically involved with a man connected to organized crime, a relationship that stirred plenty of tabloid attention. But she pushed forward professionally, forming her own production company with a publicist, even though the ambitious project they envisioned together never got made. She married again in 1960, this time to cattle station owner, and had 2 more daughters before that marriage also ended in divorce. A third marriage to a stockbroker was cut short when he died not long after their wedding. And Baxter died on December 12, 1985, at age 62, after suffering a stroke while out in New York City, and she was taken off life support once it became clear there was no path to recovery, closing the book on one of the more dramatic personal lives among this cast. Now here's where the story takes an unexpected turn, because not every actor from this legendary film has passed away, and the next name on this list is proof. Debra Paget played Lilia, the devoted young woman caught in the middle of the film's most brutal subplot, and her delicate, expressive performance made her one of the emotional anchors of the story. She was born in Denver, Colorado, into a family steeped in the arts, with a painter for a father and a mother who had once worked in theater and pushed all of her children toward the stage. By the time she was a teenager, Debra had already begun building a career, and her breakout came in the 1950 Western Broken Arrow, a role that led to a long-term contract with 20th Century Fox and a string of films that showcased her striking looks. In 1956, the same year The Ten Commandments hit theaters, she also co-starred opposite Elvis Presley in his film debut, Love Me Tender, and rumors of a real-life romance between them followed her for years, rumors she later addressed directly, at one point sharing that Presley had actually proposed marriage to her. Her personal life included several marriages, and her final one, to Chinese-American oil executive Louis Kung in 1962, led her to step away from acting almost entirely to focus on raising their son. That marriage ended in divorce in 1980, and rather than returning to Hollywood, Paget quietly built a private life, eventually becoming a born-again Christian, and briefly hosting a religious program on a Christian broadcasting network in the early 1990s. And here is the twist: Debra Paget is still alive today. As of 2025 and into 2026, she is in her early 90s, living quietly outside the public eye, largely in Texas, having chosen decades ago to step out of the spotlight rather than chase it. She rarely gives interviews, has no public social media presence, and by her own account has no regrets about the life she built after acting. Out of this entire star-studded cast, she stands as the last surviving lead, a genuinely rare thing in industry where 70 years usually leaves almost no one behind. Edward G. Robinson played Dathan, the ambitious and treacherous high priest whose hunger for power made him one of the film's most memorable villains. Robinson had already built a career playing morally complicated men, and Dathan gave him another chance to blend charm with menace in a way few actors could pull off convincingly. Born in Bucharest, Romania, Robinson immigrated to the United States as a child, settling in New York with his family, and he found his way to acting through both stage work and small film roles before his career-defining turn as Rico Bondello in Little Caesar in 1931, a performance that essentially created the template for the Hollywood gangster archetype. Over a career spanning 5 decades, he appeared in more than 100 films and roughly 40 Broadway productions, moving fluidly between hardened criminals and more nuanced, vulnerable characters in films like Double Indemnity and Key Largo. Away from the screen, Robinson was politically outspoken, particularly in his opposition to fascism during the 1930s and 1940s, a stance that eventually led him to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee during the Red Scare, though he was ultimately cleared of any wrongdoing. He was also a passionate art collector, amassing one of the most respected private collections of French Impressionist work in Hollywood, featuring pieces by artists like Renoir, Degas, and Van Gogh. A costly divorce in the 1950s forced him to sell off roughly half of that collection, though he spent years afterward working to rebuild what he had lost. Edward G. Robinson died on January 6, 1973, at the age of 79, following a battle with bladder cancer, and after his death, the remaining portion of his art collection sold for a sum that would be worth tens of millions of dollars today, a final testament to both his taste and his legacy as one of Hollywood's most respected character actors. Yul Brynner brought Ramesses to life with a level of intensity that made the character nearly as unforgettable as Heston's Moses, and his commanding delivery of the film's most famous line turned it into one of the most quoted moments in classic cinema. Brynner cultivated an air of mystery around his own background for most of his life, at times claiming an exotic, fabricated heritage, but accounts from his own family later revealed he was actually born in Russia, the son of a Russian doctor's daughter and an engineer of mixed European heritage. After his father left the family, his mother relocated with him, and his sister first to Manchuria and eventually to Paris, where Brynner drifted away from formal schooling and found his way into the world of performance, playing guitar in nightclubs among Russian expatriate communities, and even briefly working as a trapeze performer. He moved to the United States in 1941 to study acting, eventually landing on Broadway, where his career took off. His defining role came in The King and I, a part that earned him both a Tony Award and an Academy Award, making him one of the rare performers to win both of the industry's top honors for playing the exact same character on stage and screen. Even as his health declined in the 1970s, he continued touring the world reprising that role, refusing to let illness stop him from performing. As lung cancer, caused by decades of heavy smoking, began to take its toll, Brynner used what time he had left to become a public advocate against tobacco use, recording a warning message that aired after his death. Yul Brynner died on October 10, 1985, at the age of 65, and he was laid to rest in France, leaving behind a legacy built on one of the most singular screen presences of his generation. Nina Foch played Bithiah, the Egyptian princess who rescues the infant Moses from the Nile and raises him as her own, and her performance gave the film some of its most tender, emotionally grounded moments. Foch came from an artistic family, raised by an American actress and singer mother, and a Dutch conductor and composer father who built a respected career across both